Hello everyone, back tuning into today's video. Going to have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days for today's video. This will take us into the second week of September. We're actually going to extend out towards the middle of September with a more extended GFS run. And we'll also have a look at what's happening in the tropical Atlantic. It looks like things are beginning to develop there, but we'll begin by having a look at the Arctic Oscillation and the North Atlantic Oscillation. We haven't looked at these for quite some time. So this chart just here is the Arctic Oscillation observed and forecast chart. The black line here tells us where we've been with the AO going right way back to the beginning of May. Red lines at the end where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic Oscillation to go. And then this is just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere in the North Pole over the Arctic. It's not driving anything, it just shows or tells you what the atmosphere is doing. So when the Arctic Oscillation is positive, you've generally got low pressure up over the pole. And then when the Arctic Oscillation is negative, you've generally got high pressure up over the pole. Now, throughout this summer, really going back into May, and probably before that into April, the Arctic Oscillation has been in its positive phase. So you can see from the black line here, we've had a very, very long run of positivity of the Arctic Oscillation throughout the summer and even going back into the spring. Couple of negative episodes, but only very weakly negative. One at the end of June, and then one in the second half of July through to the beginning of August. But other than those fairly short-lived negative periods, we've been in a prolonged positive phase of the Arctic Oscillation. This tells us we had a lot of low pressure up over the pole through this summer. And we know that because actually, although we've had a very hot summer in the UK and in much of Europe, actually further north into Greenland, over the North Pole, it's been really quite a cool summer, especially around Greenland and Iceland. They've had a very miserable summer indeed. And that's because we've had low pressure up there, had the jet stream being pushed up there as well. And that's the reason that the Arctic Oscillation has been positive throughout this summer. So remember, it's just an index that's reflecting the atmospheric state. It's not driving anything. The reason the Arctic Oscillation is positive there through the summer is because we've had lots of low pressure over the pole, which has sent the scale into positive territory. Now, GFS ensembles are keeping the Arctic Oscillation positive through to the beginning of September. That's September 1st just there. But beyond that, there are signs that the Arctic Oscillation is on the move. It may be we're going into, let's go further into September, into a more negative phase of the AM. That's something we've not had for quite a long while. You'll probably have to go back to early April or even to March to find the Arctic Oscillation as negative as that forecast is showing. Now, do keep in mind, this is forecast. These are forecast charts, they're ensembles, so they're as unreliable as any other forecast data. May not come off like that. It may not be that the Arctic Oscillation goes as negative as that, but at the moment, it does look as though we're seeing a bit of a change beginning to take place over the Arctic in terms of that Arctic Oscillation. So it looks like we've got signs of high pressure beginning to start building towards the northern latitudes. Now, the high pressure we're going to have over the next few days is going to bring lots of dry weather for the first week, 10 days of September, a lot of dry and warm weather. But it's going to get itself up to Scandinavia, I think, through the course of next week. So part of this change to a negative AO could be that the high pressure is going to Scandinavia. And of course in winter that's going to be quite a cold signal, but in September it won't be overly cold. Easterly winds in September are going to be generally quite warm. If that high pressure was to get to Greenland though, and we wouldn't be able to tell if it was or not via this chart, all this is showing is that there's high pressure within the northern latitude, but it doesn't tell you exactly where that high pressure is going to be. If that high pressure was to get to Greenland, then that would be a much cooler and also a much more unsettled signal in September, because you get low pressure, the jet stream coming underneath that Greenland high, and you would turn things significantly more unsettled and cooler. As I said, there's no way of knowing from this chart exactly where the high pressure is going to be sitting. All that is telling you is that some sort of high pressure is going to be building, or the GFS ensembles are forecasting some sort of high pressure to be building in the Arctic region within the next couple of weeks. But certainly signs of a change, and something we haven't seen for quite a long while. So we'll keep an eye on that. North Atlantic Oscillation is very similar. The black line here, again, tells us where we've been with the NAO. Red lines at the end, where Jeff Sommel's forecasting the NAO to go. Again, remember, this is just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere, this time in the North Atlantic as opposed to the Arctic. So again, just as with the AO, we've been in a very prolonged positive phase of the NAO too through this summer. Yes, at times we have dipped down to sort of neutral conditions, just there around the start of July, neutral. Again, around the middle of July, neutral there. Late July, neutral also. And one little burst of negativity of the NAO at the beginning of June. But other than that, again, the trend has been very much into positive territory with the NAO for the last few months. Still forecast to be positive with the NAO for the beginning of September. And whilst it's not quite as strong a signal in terms of the NAO forecast as it is for the AO forecast to go negative, we do again see signs that the NAO is beginning to reduce here as we go further into September, particularly towards the middle of September. Signs that we might be seeing the NAO and the AO both trending into negative territory. Now, as I say, we've got to go back to sort of first half of April and into March for the last time we had a protracted period of negativity of the AO and the NAO. So we've been in this positive phase of the AO and NAO for a very long time now, several months, and you would expect before much longer this is going to have to change. Now, it may not be that this change is going to happen in September, but certainly at some point through this autumn, I would anticipate we will have a burst of negativity of both the AO and the NAO. If we do, we could find colder and more unsettled conditions starting to develop. It will be interesting to see how that plays out. But at the moment, the GFS models are sort of hinting at the possibility of some sort of change taking place, major sort of circulation pattern change taking place at some point, particularly towards, I would have thought, the middle, maybe second half of September. We should wait and see on that. These are the 500 millibar height anomaly flowcharts from the Penn State University. We've got the ECMWF here on the top, and the GFS, which I'll have a look at in a moment, is on the bottom. 500 millibars, 85 feet is an area in the absolute high pressure and low pressure are being moved around by the jet stream running above. Red extrapolates to high pressure and blue to low pressure. Now, this kind of signals why the AO particularly is probably trending into negative territory, because we've got this area of above average heights indicated by these red colours to the north of the UK, and also they do back over to Scandinavia as well. Not quite northern blocking. To have northern blocking, we would have to have a high pressure more centred around there. So Greenland and up towards the North Pole. So it's not quite northern blocking, but certainly that high pressure is a fairly long way north. Remember, these are the mean flow charts for 7 to 10 days' time, so they're going to take us towards the second week of September. And so that would be enough probably to reduce the AO. I'm not sure if it would be enough to get it into negative territory, such as the GFS bubbles are showing. But certainly it would be enough to reduce the AO quite significantly. We also have this deep area of low pressure, below average heights in the Atlantic. Not much of an Azores high, so that would be why the NAO is also starting to shift. Now, in its own terms, this is still not a particularly cold scenario, because as I say, if this was winter, these would be cold charts, because you drag the air in from that sort of direction. But this is September, so it's going to be relatively warm with these easterly winds. But if that high pressure was to go much further north and northwest, if it was to become centred more around there, for example, as opposed to where it is centering just to the north of Scotland, then that would be a cooler and more unsettled signal. So we've got to watch out what's happening with this high pressure, I think, as we get towards the middle of September and possibly the second half of the month. Then we've got the GFS on the bottom. So again, very similar. Look at this area of above average heights here over UK and also extending way to the north and northeast. That's a major area of high pressure. Low pressure still in around Greenland. So the flow jet is doing something like that. Again, this is enough to reduce the Arctic oscillation. Again, I'm not sure it's enough to get it negative, because we've still got low pressure and the jet stream around the actual North Pole itself up there and around Greenland. So again, you would expect, although the Arctic oscillation is reducing, it's not as positive as it has been, may not be enough to get the AO into negative temperature on its own terms. But again, if this high pressure was to go much further north, if it's centering like there up to there, but if it was to center more here to here, then that would be proper blocking, and we would start to see the AO really going very negative. And, of course, we would then start to push the black lines, the jet stream underneath that block, and we'd start to move the jet stream across the Atlantic, and it would not only turn a lot cooler, it would also turn a lot more unsettled as well. But as it is, that high pressure will bring lots of dry, and certainly for the first week to 10 days of September, plenty of warm weather as well. So these are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles next couple of weeks. The red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average. We're still pretty cool with the upper air temperatures at the moment. So we end August on a relatively cool note. Most evident at night. It was a cold night last night across a large part of the country. Been a pretty cold night tonight as well. But over the weekend, we're going to see the temperatures lifting up. We're going into a warm phase through the course of next week. This is the first week of September. Just here, warmer than average upper air temperatures. Not sure these upper air temperatures are quite as warm as they were a couple of days ago, though. A couple of days ago, we was thinking probably mid to upper 20s Celsius. At the outside, the chance of 30 degrees Celsius. Now, there are still a few ensemble members that are going that high to that sort of level. But several of these ensemble members are now at a cooler level as well. So I would suspect temperatures are going to be sort of low, possibly mid-20s Celsius through the early part of the coming week. And then probably reducing to upper teens or low 20s Celsius through the second half of next week. Something like that seems more probable. But still, overall, the upper air temperatures are remaining above average with the ensemble. And there is a lot of scatter there. So some of these ensemble members are still very warm. Probably you'd say even hot, but several of them are quite cool as well. So obviously within this high pressure, the upper air temperature air masses are changing and fluctuating from model to model. As I explained in the video, I think it's yesterday or maybe the day before, high pressure in September does not guarantee it's going to get very hot. In July, high pressure will nearly always guarantee hot weather if it's around for more than a day or two. But in September, it does depend very, very greatly on the exact nature of the upper air temperatures, as to how warm or hot it gets, because the sun is losing energy rapidly now. The sun is losing its energy rapidly. By the 23rd, the sun is going to be on the equator, and by the end of the month, the sun will be in the southern hemisphere. It will actually leave our hemisphere, which means it is losing its energy very, very quickly now. So you have to compensate that with increasingly warm air masses if you want particularly warm weather. So you're not guaranteed to get very high temperatures in September under high pressure. You certainly can do. As I said in a video recently, only a couple of years ago, 2016, we managed to achieve 34 Celsius, 94 Fahrenheit in the early part of September. So it can get very, very hot indeed in September, but it's not anywhere near as guaranteed to do so in September as it is kind of in July under high pressure. So obviously it looks quite variable with those upper air temperatures, and that will depend exactly how warm it's going to be next week. As far as the precipitation is concerned, I think a lot of dry weather coming up over the next week to 10 days. That looks quite clear. Maybe signs it's turning a bit more unsettled, though, through the second week of September and going into the middle of the month. But of course, that's in the extended time frame, and it is really unreliable. That's a precipitation anomaly for the next week. Takes us from the 30th of August, 7th of September. It's coming out substantially drier than average. That's also going to be the precipitation anomaly. So I can just flip that over for you and show you the temperature anomaly. There it is, and that's coming out a little bit warmer than average. So still fairly warm for the week ahead, 30th of August to 7th of September. Probably not as hot as you might expect it to be, given the high to normally flow charts we were just looking at. And it looks like the real heat is actually going to be down in the southeast of Europe, where we've got these deep red colours here in the southeast of Europe, where it was actually quite a cool summer. Looks a lot hotter there as we're going through to the beginning of September. In the northwest, yes, it is a bit warmer than average. It's a little bit warmer than average, but certainly not overly so. Now, this is the midnight run of the GFS from West Central. I can't show you the 6 o'clock run of the GFS at West Central because unfortunately it's not updated. I will show you it at Metro Seal though very shortly. But this is the midnight run of the GFS, and it was showing this ridge through the country through the early part of next week. That's going to bring some pretty warm air into the south. Mid-20s Celsius temperatures certainly possible. There's a cold front that's through there, perhaps bringing cooler air to Scotland and Northern Ireland. By the time we get through to Tuesday, the ridge is building through the country, but we have brought that cold front further south, so we've changed the air mass and turned it just that little bit cooler within the high pressure. That explains the fluctuations that we're seeing within the GFS ensembles. There's little weather fronts that will come through the high pressure at times, changing the air mass, cooling it down or warming it up, and that explains. And they're going to differ from ensemble member to ensemble member in when they're coming in, so that will explain the fluctuations that we're seeing within the GFS upper air temperature ensembles. Through next week, high pressure was maintained on the midnight run of the GFS. Look out for that area of low pressure just there. That is a tropical storm or hurricane. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. We go into day 10 and the high pressure is still there. Notice it's increasingly moving up to Scandinavia. So we saw it on the high to anomaly flow chart. That's turning wind into an EC direction, which isn't going to be cold in September. That's going to be quite a warm easterly flow. In the extended range, the high pressure fest goes on. We get to the very end of the GFS midnight run, which was Saturday the 15th of September. Actually, we're pulling up quite a hot southerly wind at the very end, although we've got this low pressure containing the remains of that tropical storm or hurricane out to the west of us. And so if we could roll on a little bit beyond that, it would probably turn more unsettled. But it looks pretty dry, pretty hot up to the middle of September. Now, as I say, I can't show you the 6 o'clock run with westcentral.d because unfortunately it's not updated, but I can show you it at metroseal.fr. So again, we're starting off at the beginning of next week with high pressure through the country, bringing lots of dry and fine conditions. That high pressure is maintained through next week. We're going up to the end of next week. High pressure is still there, but increasingly moving up towards Scandinavia, you'll notice. Already perhaps going a little bit more unsettled underneath it. Got these shallow areas of low pressure that might threaten some rain to the very far south as we're getting that high pressure further north to Scandinavia. And then this is the extended range up to day 10. So high pressure continues to dominate the weather really up to day 10. There's that tropical storm or hurricane that's just down there, the remains of it, anyway, right at the very bottom of the chart. And in the extended range, so again, we have a go at building that high pressure through the country, but always a little bit more, a little bit cooler really with this particular run, the 6 o'clock run of the GFS. That's how we finish up right at the end of it. Looks like this high pressure is increasingly being eroded and moves southwards as the jet stream, invigorated by the remains of that tropical storm or hurricane, are rolling over top of that area of high pressure. This is the ECMWF. Again, the ridge is through the country through the start of next week. In fact, the ridge is dominating throughout next week. So it does look as though the first week of September is going to bring loads and loads of dry and warm weather into the extended range. That's day 10. So hints of northern blocking there. That will be enough to send the Arctic oscillation certainly towards neutral, maybe even going a little bit negative with the AO if that came off, because we have got high pressure to the north of the UK. This low pressure has stalled in the middle of the Atlantic. Probably starting to bring down some cooler air actually around the edge of that high pressure, certainly to Scandinavia, possibly getting back towards the eastern side of the UK as well. If we was to take that high pressure any further north and west, if we was to take it to there, for example, then this low pressure just here would start to roll underneath it with the jet stream. So that really is very close, although it looks as though the high pressure is locked in and going to carry on bringing main dry weather. At this time of year, that is actually very close to turning things a lot more unsettled. I think certainly the first week to 10 days of September we're going to see a lot of high pressure, but how long this is going to go on for into kind of like the middle of September and then the second half of the month, I think that does remain to be seen. I said I'd show you what's happening in the tropical Atlantic, so we'll finish off with that. We've got this, it's been very quiet, of course, through the start of this hurricane and Atlantic storm season, but we've got this red X just here coming off the coast of North Africa. I'll just show you what the National Hurricane Centre is saying about this. So they're saying satellite images and surface observations indicate that a well-defined low-pressure system is located just off the west coast of Senegal, Africa. Environmental conditions are favourable for a tropical depression or a tropical storm to form as the disturbance moves westwards or northwestwards at about 15 miles an hour near the Cabo Verde Islands during the next day or two. The system is expected to bring heavy rain and strong winds to the Cabo Verde Islands on Friday and Saturday, and if the current development trend continues, tropical storm watches or warnings will likely be required for those islands later today. Interests on the Cabo Verde Islands should continue to closely monitor the progress of this developing disturbance. So within the next 48 hours, we've got an 80% chance of forming a tropical storm, and in the next 5 days, we've got a 90% chance of forming a tropical storm. So this could well be our next named storm. I think it will be Florence. And if I just take you back... Let's just take you back to midnight run of the GFS. So that is the storm that's off the coast of Senegal right now. That's it just there on the 8th of September in the middle of the Atlantic. This could be a big player as we get through to the middle part of September in possibly breaking down this ridge of high pressure. Finally, I'll just show you this. It does look as though September could be a more active month in the tropics. As I say, I've had a very quiet start to the Atlantic tropical storm and hurricane season. But this is the 700 millibar height anomaly that CFS-V2 is forecasting for September. This is the very latest. So notice that for the North Atlantic, it's got low pressure around Greenland. It still signals this area of above average heights to be in the middle of the Atlantic and ridging into the UK and also going up there, Scandinavia. But what I want you to focus on is this big blue area that's down here in the tropical Atlantic. So that's Africa just there, and this is the Caribbean over here. In between, we've got this dark blue area within the 700 millibar flow. So low pressure is being predicted to be through the tropical Atlantic this September. Haven't seen that through the course of this summer so far. And this could well be signs that this first tropical development that we have off the coast of Senegal is going to be the first of a few disturbances. It could be that we're in for a much more lively September in terms of tropical storm and hurricane development. That's what CFS was forecasting in terms of a 700 millibar height anomaly earlier in the month. So I can show you and find out when this was updated. So this was from the 6th of August. And it was much more anticyclonic there, the forecast for September, which just goes to show how unreliable CFS-V2 is, really. But just a couple of weeks ago, it was much more anticyclonic in terms of a 700 millibar flow through the tropical Atlantic with all of these reds and orange colours. So obviously quite a big change has taken place in terms of what the CFS is forecasting for the tropical Atlantic in September over the past couple of weeks. There are major differences there from the model, and if we do start to get a few tropical storms going, then that's going to have a big impact on the overall Atlantic pattern. It will be, it could be a game changer really in terms of the patterns that we've had through the Atlantic into Europe over so many months now. If there was going to be anything that kind of broke us out of this continuous high pressure type pattern, it will probably be the hurricane season ramping up. So let's just wait and see where that's going to go. But it is certainly quite a substantial change that the CFS is forecasting there for September in terms of the tropics compared to what it was showing couple of weeks ago. Coming back to the more reliable time frame, though, there's no doubt about it, the first week to 10 days of September will be dominated by high pressure. We're going to have lots of dry and pretty warm weather as well. So it's not an Indian summer. Indian summer is more sort of warm weather in late September or October, but it is certainly a spell of protracted late summer warm and dry conditions. Whether this goes on into the middle and second half of September, we shall see. Tomorrow we've got JMA Friday, and that's going to have it's going to be a month-ahead look ahead with the Japanese CFS V2 models, and we'll also have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days as well. 25-minute video, so it's an extended one, but I wanted to bring you up to date with all of the developments. Hope you found it interesting and informative. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.